Hi everyone, it's Monday, and on Mondays, well, at least lately, we talk about boundaries. Everybody's favorite topic. I laugh because it is probably one of the hottest topics I've ever sort of scratched at and poked at. A lot of people want to talk about boundaries. So, we're going to keep talking about boundaries. A couple weeks ago, we talked about sort of an introduction to boundaries and why they're important. Last week, we went through a pretty extensive list, also on my blog, of types of boundaries, which was much longer than most of us anticipated and made a lot of people that reached out to me go, ooh, there's a lot of types of boundaries. And I was like, yeah, I know. So this week, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the negative consequences of not setting boundaries and the positive consequences of having clear boundaries. And then I want to dive into setting boundaries and what that's going to look like. So I think it goes without saying that what we've established so far is that boundaries are necessary, that we should figure out how to have them, and that we should dive into doing that hard work. It is hard work. It will be challenging. So, I think there's sort of pros and cons, right? The cons, the negative consequences of not having boundaries, of just lacking boundaries and being like, come on in, wide open space, is that you will often have a sense of overwhelm or stress. You will, with the lack of boundaries, it means that you are open for everyone to weigh in on what you should be doing, how you should be helping them, asking you for more when you have nothing else to give. It can lead to a real sense of kind of worthlessness and a value judgment, because over time, when you lack boundaries, you just say yes to a lot of things that you don't want to do, and it depletes your energy, and it doesn't leave you much room to follow the things and the passions and the creative elements that you want to follow. So when we lack boundaries, we just have a really hard time saying no and setting limits on how we spend our energy and what we're going to do. It doesn't mean that you can't, but boundaries are really the first step of saying, you can only go this far, and then my answer is no, right? I can do this for you, but not that. So the boundary line, the fence, as we've been calling it, is really what helps set up that ability to say no to some things, and to say yes to some things. That's the wonderful part. The pro side is that as we start to say no to some things, we can say yes to more things. And that is super, super fun. It's fun to be able to look at the things in front of you, the buffet of options, and say, ooh, I want to do that. Because you've set a boundary and said, I'm not going to do these things for you or for anyone or even for myself, but I am going to lean into these things, right? And so it gives you the space to say yes to more. It also can really improve your mood, your mental health, your stress levels can drop, and it can really start to give you a sense of empowerment and personal agency. And the way I think about agency is it's this feeling of knowing that I can set goals, have authority, and make decisions for what I want. Right? It's my personal agency. I'm in charge of the vessel that is me, right? And setting boundaries gives me that sense of agency. It also can create stronger and healthier relationships, because the more I set those boundaries, the more I can say yes to things that would really be meaningful in my relationships, instead of just saying yes to things across the board that I don't want to do or spend my energy on. So if you want something from me and it fits within my boundaries, you get the best version of me, not some exhausted, depleted version of me that said yes to you and 10 other people. I just want to make a note, and I say this on my blog as well. If you have narcissists and abusers and sociopaths in your life, they will not like this. Like, let's not pretend that everyone around you is going to be like, ooh, boundaries. No. Even people who aren't those things in your life may have a reaction to the first time you say, no, I don't believe I will. Right? Because we've so programmed people to treat us a certain way, and that they're asking of us is acceptable, and we will say yes, that when we first say, no, I believe I'll pass on that, you'll need to find someone else, it can be stunning. Now, if they are an abuser or a narcissist or a sociopath, they're going to have a really hard time with it, because you are where they take source from, right? And you are saying, no, thank you. I believe I will not. continue to let you take from me. So it can be tricky. And so you need a partner, right? So there's some pros and some cons, right? And then I want you to start thinking about what does it look like to identify and set boundaries. I mean, what you really need to do is identify your needs. What are your values? What do you want? And then start to set the limits, the non-negotiables. What are you not willing to give up anymore? Not one more day am I willing to give up this. Is that your creativity? Is that your time? Is that your self-esteem? Is it what? What are non-negotiable? I do not want to give this up for one more day. I want to say yes to something else, right? What are those things? Start to really write them down and really think about what they are. And then start to think about how you're going to articulate and communicate those very clearly. They need to be I statements. They need to be statements of, I am going to do this. I want that. I have decided this is my limit. I am going to spend my time this way, right? And then you need to enforce those boundaries. And we'll talk more about enforcing boundaries and what it looks like to be consistent, and what the consequences can be of boundaries next time. A couple exercises that you can use to start setting these personal boundaries. First of all, I would journal the hell out of this, right? I would sit down with a piece of paper and say, what are my needs? What are my wants? What are my non-negotiables, right? And just start writing them down and trying to figure out and what are my values? Like, what values do you want these things to really line up against? And I would really write them down. And then consider sharing that with someone that you trust, whether that's a friend, a therapist, a coach. If you don't have someone, I'm happy to play that role. But sit down and say, I've made this list and I'd like someone else to hear my list. What can often help when you make that list is that there's someone in the room going, those are valid, right? If you say something crazy, the person might be like, whoa, that's a big boundary. But most of the time, for those of us who have never set them, the boundaries are going to seem like, yeah, that's reasonable, when you start to really read them out to someone else. But it helps. It helps to say them out loud. And then consider finding someone, maybe that same person or someone else, to role play with. How is it going to sound when you put your boundary out there? What is it going to feel like? What could someone else say? What could make you tense up and change your mind? Oh, never mind, I'll do it. Versus what will help you hold the line as you practice setting boundaries. I had an experience about a year ago of setting a boundary and saying to someone, if you would like access to me and to have a relationship with me, you owe me an apology. And it was hard. It was hard to say. It was hard to say more than once because the person didn't take me seriously. And then there have been times, because the person chose not to apologize and doesn't believe they owe me an apology. It has been hard a little bit from time to time to then hold that line and not sort of slide back in there and be like, well, maybe you can have access to me if you... No, the access is through the apology. That's my boundary. You owe me something to have access to me. Now that's a pretty intense boundary, right? Like that's here's the fence and the gate is locked and you cannot come in unless you show me something that would enable me to unlock the gate. And boundary setting, the reason I tell you that is that I want you to know that even once you get decent at boundaries, like I'm pretty good at no, I don't believe I will do that. I'm not interested in that, or no, thank you. I'm pretty good boundary setter. As a matter of fact, my friend Marilyn would say, I'm very good at saying, I'm not planning on discussing that, right? I'm not engaging in that discussion. And she used to laugh she's like, I didn't know we could do that. I didn't know you could just tell people you're not going to discuss things. And I was like, yeah, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in having that conversation. I'm not interested in what that person is offering me. And I've decided to walk away from it. So I'm pretty good at boundaries. And even then, setting a boundary that was significant enough to say, the risk I'm willing to take is that I will lose you if you cannot do what I need to be in relationship with me. It was still hard. So it's not like it's going to magically get easier, but I can promise you, you will never be able to set a boundary that intense if you don't start with something. And that starting is the list of, what do I want? What do I need? What are my non-negotiables? what does respect of me and my space and my boundaries look like, right? If you need a partner on that, because you probably do, if you're new to this work, you will need a partner because you need someone to help you kind of work through setting your values. You need someone to work through that list with. I would be happy to do that. That's part of my coaching practice. It's something that I absolutely enjoy doing. And because I've been on the other side where I had no boundaries, I know what it's like and how hard it can be. So if you want some help, I'm here. Otherwise, feel free to go to my blog and read more details on kind of the pros and cons and what those exercises look like. And I will be back next week to talk a little bit more about boundaries.